Hello and welcome to another episode for the CG workflow playlist. And in this episode, I want to show you a pipeline or a workflow between Lightwave and Houdini. So here is the Lightwave scene I created. It is just a room with a vase on top of it, and I have a camera, and you can see that this camera has an animation in it. So you have two possibilities to export a Lightwave scene into another application, in this case Houdini, by selecting your meshes and export it as an FBX or as an object, an Alembic file if you have a moving camera in the file. But I will use the OD Toolkit for the export. I already have installed the OD Toolkit. You can see on top here I have the tab created, and in this tab I have these two functions, the OD scene to Houdini and the OD motion to Houdini. So the only thing that I have to do here is to click on the OD scene to Houdini, and now here I can see a small disclaimer that says what is possible, what is not possible, or what works and what's not. And here it says that if you have a subdivision model or a model that has a subdivision modifier on top of it, it will be not gets transferred correct. But that's not a big deal because every other software has a kind of a subdivision modifier or a subdivision tool in it. And then you can apply this to your mesh and the mesh will be smooth and round. Then you can define the save path where you want to save the files. And then you can define if you want to select it only objects exported or all objects. I click on all objects. And then you can define if you want to override some channels deformations and you want to export MDDs. MDDs are a kind of a cache file that saves or store the point position in space. And if you have something like this, an MDD file that drives a simulation in Lightwave, you can export that as well. In this case, I don't have any MDD file, and then what I have to do is press OK. All right, so here you can see the files that are exported. It's exporting this export.txt file, and it's exporting also all the objects that you have in your scene. In this case, I have just two objects, the vase and the wall. If you have more layers or more objects, it will export every object separate. The file that we need in Houdini is this export.txt file. So let's jump right into Houdini. All right, welcome. We are in the Houdini world. So let's bring in this Lightwave scene inside Houdini. Here as well, I have the OD Toolkit installed. So I click on the OD tool, and then I go down to the import export. I move to the next window, scroll down, and you can see here it's import Lightwave scene. Navigate to the project folder, Houdini export, and then select this export.txt file and press accept. So now a window pops up. This window asking you or say to you that there is a light in the scene. So what you want to do with this light? You can create a dummy null, a mantra, octane, redshift, or a 3D light out of it. In this case, because I will delete it anyway, I create just a dummy null for now. The second window is asking you, do you want to create materials? I said no, because I want to create my own materials right away. You will see this later, why I create my own materials. And then the last one is the timeline mismatch. This window can pop up when the timeline or the frame rate between the two different softwares are not exactly the same. Okay. So the only thing that you can do here is say match with the Lightwave scene or say no and use the Houdini timeline. In this case, it makes absolutely sense because we have the moving camera that we use the Lightwave timeline. So press yes. All right, so now you can see that our scene is imported correctly and it's imported in different geometry nodes. One geometry node is the wall and one is the vase. And here is the light dummy. I delete this and here is our camera. So when I select the camera, you can see down here that we have all these green keyframes here. That means that this camera and the movement of the camera, you see, is transferred. Okay, so I have the movement of the camera inside the scene, which is great. First of all, we have to apply UV maps because we need UV maps to apply the materials later on. So let's do that. I'm going to here and I select here with the tab key, use the UV, and here I use the UV unwrap, and I have a nice little UV unwrap. If I want to just tile it down a little bit, I can use the UV transform node and I can bring that in and I can start the tiling this guy right away. It's always good to have here an output node, and we call this room out. Press the L key to align the nodes, and we make the same thing for our vase. Let's go inside, go and create a UV. This time I use the UV texture node, bring this in and change here from orthographic to cylindrical. And here as well, just create an output node and call this vase out. Okay, press the L key to align everything, and there we go. All right, so now we have this prepared, and now we are ready to bring everything into Solaris and into the USD state. So in Houdini, on top here, you have this presets, UI presets that you can choose for. You can use Solaris or Solaris LookDev or LookDev modeling. It depends on which phase of your production you are. You can choose different UIs that are presets UIs. I created my own Solaris Workspace UI. So when I click this, the UI will change. There we go. And now we are in Solaris. You can see that here has changed. It says Solaris, right? And here is the node network space. And here I have a big viewport space. So now we have to bring in the scene from the object level into the Houdini USD space. So how we can do that? Press the tab key, type in scene. And here you can see I can import the scene all. I can import only the camera. I can import only the lights. I can import materials if I have to, right? In this case, I choose scene import all. So click on that and the new node has been created. And you can see that now our scene is here in the USD space. Let's rename this and call this scene from Lightwave. There we go. And now I have to create a node tree that allows me to create materials, cameras, everything that I need to render out the scene. Instead of doing this over and over again, this is a workflow tutorial. I created a recipe and I choose a Karma render setup recipe, and it's creating automatically all the nodes for me. The Lightwave camera that is in the object level will be not recognized by this Karma render settings in the USD space. So we have to have the USD camera, create a USD camera in the exact same position that the Lightwave camera is. I'm going here and I select the Lightwave camera, and then I'm going up here and create a new USD camera. And now this camera is in the exact same position like the Lightwave camera. Now we can link this together. I can go to the Karma render settings and I change this to my resolution 700 by 1000. I can always go higher. For this demonstration, I stay low so the renderer is much faster. Then when I'm here, I can switch. I can change here from Karma CPU to Karma GPU. And in the image output, I can go to filter and I can turn on here rather the NVIDIA optics denoiser or the Intel Odin denoiser. I choose the Odin Intel denoiser. Make sure that you have no tone mapping on right there. So one important thing is that I have to specify the correct camera. Okay, so this is my camera that I want to use. So I click and drag this camera here. And so now I'm sure that this camera will be used for rendering. The next step that I have to do is I have to link the transformation, this transformation value, with the camera from Lightwave. So how I can do that? I go back to the object level, select that camera, and you can see here, this box has a color. It's this aqua green color. And as soon as I'm in a keyframe, it turns to green. So whenever you have a color in these boxes, you know that there is a keyframe inside of this box, and this value will change. If these boxes are black, we have no keyframes at all. So what we need is we need this translate coordinates here. So we go right click and then we go down to copy parameters, go back to the stage, select this camera, go to the transform tab, and then here in the translate, right click and go to paste relative reference. Houdini writes down a expression, and now this camera here is linked to the camera from the object level. This value here, we can bring it back to 0 right there. And so now this camera is selected, and when I scroll to the timeline, you see that the camera will move. And now I have exactly the same camera view that I had in Lightwave. And I can also see that I have the movement inside the USD space. I come up here and create a environment light and place this right here. And when I start the Karma XPU render, you can see that I have the scene inside our USD state. I can increase the exposure and voila, there we go. Here is our scene from Lightwave to Houdini in the USD space, and everything works fine. So here is the material library. I double click and I'm in the material state. And here I can create the USD MaterialX builder. Why I use this, you will see it in a moment. So I call this vase. I dive inside, and this MTLX standard surface I don't need. I can delete that. Instead, I use the openPBR surface. Why I use openPBR surface, you may think. You will see this in a moment. I plug this in right there, and then I need an image, MTLX image node, and I plug that into the base color right there. And then I'm going into properties, and I make sure that the signature is set to color. I load in the texture, and is that one. And I also make sure that the color space set to sRGB texture right there. Call this color. Duplicate this node. Call this roughness. And I duplicate this again. Call this normal. So the roughness node, I have to make sure that this is set to float and this is set to raw. And I choose the corresponding texture. And then in the normal, vector 3, and the has to be raw as well. So now I choose the normal map here. And what I need here is I need a normal map node, and then I have to plug that into geometry normal. Okay, so I zoom in for you. So you can see it's plugged in into geometry, and then here geometry normal. All right, so this is our material. So let's go back to stage. And here we have this material linker. I click on this material linker. Now I have here the vase material right there. So I can bring this in, and then I can choose the vase and bring that in here. And now you can see that the material on the vase is applied. So when we bring back the dome light and start the Karma XPU, you can see that everything is working. We have the normal map, we have the color, and we have all the texture informations on the vase applied. So now you may think why you use the openPBR material system. So the reason is simple. The reason is that now what I can do here, instead of Karma, I can use another recipe. This is the V-Ray render rub, and I can plug that in here. And now what's great about this thing is, and I can bring on the dome light. Now I can choose the V-Ray render, and you can see, voila, the scene will render as well in V-Ray. And this has to do that the material is openPBR. V-Ray and Karma supports openPBR materials in the MaterialX contacts. Alright, so now that's basically it. So you learned how you can bring in a scene from Lightwave to Houdini, and how you can link the cameras together, and how you can create materials. And if you have multiple renderers that you want to test out, like here, you can use the openPBR material system in the MaterialX contacts, and then everything works fine. You can render in Karma, you can render in V-Ray, and you can render with every other renderer that supports the openPBR and the MaterialX contacts. You may ask why you want to bring a Lightwave scene into Houdini and render it in Houdini. Well, the answer is we can. Why not? It can be possible that you have a pipeline and you have some Lightwave artists and you have some Houdini artists, and the lighting department works in Houdini, the rendering department works in Houdini, but the modeling department works in Lightwave, or the scene assembly or the light or the scene creation is done in Lightwave. It's a pipeline. If you want to use it, you can use it. If you don't want to use it, don't use it. But it's a pipeline that works with the OD Toolkit. Check it out. I hope you liked this tutorial. Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know in the comments, or you can join our Discord server, and there is a section specific for tutorial support. Thank you for watching. Thanks for listening. And I hope you see you soon in the next tutorial very soon. Bye everybody.